And we are recording.
Good morning. Welcome to the Broadband for All Roundtable. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please use the Q&A function if you have a question. Questions will be answered at the end of the roundtable so we can combine similar questions and maximize our time. A video of this roundtable and the slides will be posted to the California Broadband Council website. We anticipate they will be posted within a week of today. If you would like to be informed when they are posted, please sign up for our broadband stakeholder list. You can find a link to sign up in the upper right-hand corner of the California Broadband Council website. A reminder to presenters to please cue Jeffrey Nolish to advance your slides when presenting. We do have a very full agenda today. We respectfully request speakers keep to their allotted timeframes and attendees adhere to the Q&A function for questions. And with the housekeeping items addressed, I'd like to introduce Governmental Operations Secretary Amy Tong, who has been playing a key role in advancing the state toward broadband for all. Secretary Tong.
Thank you, Joe. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the state's first Broadband for All Roundtable. We are pleased to see so many local and regional partners united around our common goal to close the digital divide and foster digital equity and inclusion in the state. As you know, broadband is essential in modern life. With school, work, healthcare increasingly online, California's ability to access and use broadband makes the difference between being able to fully engage in life and being cut off. And yet, many Californians still do not have access that they need. It is time to close the digital divide. We face complex and deep-rooted challenges to delivering broadband for all. We also recognize achieving broadband for all will require partnership and support from the broadband industry, federal, local, and tribal government. Thankfully, we are at a moment in time where federal and state policy, priorities, and fundings are all aligned around the goals we share. The State Broadband for All program is based on the understanding that the broadband access, adoption, and training are essential components of digital equity. Today, you will hear about the progress that California Broadband Council members have made on the Broadband for All action plan. You will hear status updates on the state's historic $6 billion broadband investment that the governor and the legislature created and funded last July with the passage of Senate Bill 156. To support these efforts, the recent federal bipartisan infrastructure legislation allocated additional $62 billion to further support states through the variety of programs to making home internet service and device affordable, and to enable states to build on and expand their digital equity efforts. The state is actively pursuing these funds to support our digital equity effort and augment the effort that you are already doing at the regional and local level. We are eager to expand our partnership and align these efforts with yours to achieve broadband for all in California. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Tong. My name is Scott Adams. I'm the Deputy Director of Broadband and Digital Literacy at the California Department of Technology. As Secretary Tong said, just want to welcome all of you. We appreciate your partnership in this effort to close the digital divide and foster digital equity throughout California. Next slide, please. As the Secretary said, Broadband for All is the state's overarching programmatic effort to close the digital divide that's really based on four things, and that's fostering access to broadband infrastructure where it's needed for unserved communities. It's about increasing affordability for home internet service, increasing adoption and usage of internet service at home to support many of the needs that the Secretary mentioned, and then ultimately, working towards digital equity and inclusion across the state. Next slide. So our office, the Broadband Office in the California Department of Technology, really focuses on working with the California Broadband Council to implement the governor's executive order to implement and see through the completion of the Broadband for All Action Plan and to oversee the development of the state's middle mile broadband initiative. Next slide. We really wanted to repurpose. We know there's a lot of common faces here, but there's also folks that may be new to the conversation, and wanted to stress that since 2010, the California Broadband Council has been the central body at the state level where 12 member entities, including 9 state agencies, the Public Utilities Commission, the California Transportation Agency, Office of Emergency Services, the Tribal Advisor, the State Libraries, Department of Education, and also the Office of the Tribal Advisor, the California Emerging Technology Fund, and members of the Senate and Assembly. And their work has really been to coordinate the deployment of broadband infrastructure and empower broadband adoption throughout the state and the unserved and underserved areas as defined by the Public Utilities Commission. Next slide. The Broadband Council's work was really informed during the COVID pandemic when the governor issued his broadband executive order, which really tasked the Broadband Council with refocusing and redoubling their efforts to close the digital divide and develop a statewide Broadband for All action plan. The executive order had a number of different items that, when the plan was developed, were rolled up into the action plan. Next slide. And wanted to again, reinforce that the Broadband Council, with input and contributions of many of you, turned around that broadband action plan in just over 4 months and aligned on really 3 main goals. The first of which is that all Californians have high performance broadband available at homes, schools, libraries, and businesses, that all Californians have access to affordable devices or broadband and necessary devices, and that all Californians can access training and support to enable digital inclusion. Next slide, please. So the Department of Technology in our office is responsible for helping monitor and support the completion of all of the actions within the Broadband for All action plan, but we lead on 6 of those 24 action items. Some that we really wanted to call out and are important and critical, areas of focus and calls to action for your partnership on are, given the significant investments in the state on broadband infrastructure in both the middle and last mile, working to enhance permitting processes at all levels of government to support completion of those projects, to identify state properties for possible use for broadband infrastructure. That's an effort that we're doing, working on very closely with the Department of General Services. The next effort is to really promote state contractual vehicles to support cost savings and efficient purchasing of broadband services and equipment. The next one is to promote and publicly report the progress of broadband adoption and of affordable services, and now the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a significant federal subsidy to support affordability for the state's residents. This Broadband for All Roundtable and the subsequent ones will be hosting throughout the rest of the year and in coming years is really in response to Action Item 18, which is to work with a number of Broadband Council partners to develop a multi-layer network of digital inclusion stakeholders to discuss ongoing needs, share resources, and coordinate initiatives. And then lastly, and most importantly, we know there's a lot of efforts out there. The action plan directed the Department of Technology to establish a Broadband for All portal to enable broadband access and information and tools, and really serve as a central repository of information for our partners and at the state, regional, and local level to coordinate efforts. Next, I'd like to introduce Connie Pereira from the Governor's Office of Business and economic development. And he's going to talk about some of the action items we're working on that are specifically of importance to this group of partners. Kainer?
Thank you very much, Scott. And very much so, thank you for being here. My name is Kainer Pereira. I'm the Senior Advisor for Business Development at the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And our office has been charged with facilitating work along 3 different avenues. One specifically around funding, and this effort is ongoing. I would like to say that in a few moments, you'll see the initial culmination of that funding element, which we presented as we showcase the Broadband for All portal. Another area where we are deeply embedded is on adoption, and that will come in multiple phases, and also will have a lot of information that will be presented in the Broadband for All portal. Initial efforts are around the EBB program, which has now been converted. But this area where I would like to have a more specific call to action and illustrating some of the points that Scott mentioned in this previous section is that a very serious area of engagement that GO-Biz and CDT and all of our agencies are embarking on is related to the function of permitting processes. In this vein, we are requesting initially your assistance in completing a survey that will enable us to further engage on the development of best practices, identifying and providing additional resources to jurisdictions who would like to align with similar enacted or already presented opportunities. And in order to be able to showcase those best practices in the best way, we are hoping that we are able to engage in this initial survey and then enable some follow-up, which will bring about additional information, opportunities, and ways for us to engage on process streamlining and improvement. I know streamlining is a dangerous term in a lot of respect, and we want to respect the processes that you have in place. We want to respect the actions that your supervisors and city councils have enacted. So in that vein, what we're trying to do is present the best case scenarios, the best information that we can. And in order to do that, we need to have it. So this first call to action is to send out this survey to obtain responses for us to be able to culminate that information in a more developed fashion. We are aiming for development and build out of this over the next few months with final delivery sometime in the July timeframe, I expect. So that means that this is a very, very front-loaded part of this process. In order for us to be able to deliver funding opportunities and imperatives in a more calculated manner as well, we want to be able to align that with the middle mile efforts as long with where you guys are in the permitting process. That being said, this is not the end all be all. I would like you guys to be willing and able to engage with our office when you are ready to engage on any of these principles. And as such, we have a team of permitting staff that are currently embedded, one in the North State, one in the Southern region, and are bringing on additional staff capacity to be able to enhance this process. On the third piece, which is related to adoption, we are continuing efforts to try and understand what the needs of the communities are. And in that vein, one of the programmatic efforts is called SURF, the Community Economic Revitalization Fund, which is intended to bring regional resources and regional culmination around the vision. Those tables will hopefully inform us about some of these unique sensitivities in these regions that are going to be required for active deployment and future engagement. And so a lot of these efforts may seem disjointed, and over the next few months, we're going to be bringing these things together to create more calls of action and to create more opportunities for you guys to engender success in your jurisdictions. Thank you, Scott.
Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate your partnership. Just wanted to reiterate that we're going to be, covering a lot of information about the various components of the state's Broadband for All program, and really, the way we've organized this session is to really demonstrate how the action plan, the middle mile initiative, the last mile programs that the CPUC is leading, the affordable connectivity program, and then future state digital equity planning all fit together to connect the dots and help the state and our partners like you close the digital divide. So given that, wanted to just reiterate what was said earlier. We will be posting a copy of the presentation slide deck, the master slides on the Broadband for All portal after this meeting, along with video recording and transcripts of the entire meeting. I did also want to provide a little bit of clarification about the relationship between the Broadband Council and the Middle Mile Advisory Committee. Really, the Broadband Council, as I said in my presentation, is the central organizing entity at the state that's looking at broadband for all holistically and implementing the Broadband for All action plan. The Middle Mile Advisory Committee was established specifically to monitor and support and provide policy advice on the state's development of the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. And that's, really the next part of this presentation is I'd like to invite Laura Sasaki, who's the Broadband Initiatives Manager at CDT, to do a walkthrough of the Broadband for All portal for all of you, which is, we'll be posting assets from this meeting and a lot of other helpful information. Laura?
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, as Scott mentioned, we have a Broadband for All portal that was a result of action item 21, and I'm going to go ahead and share that and do a quick tour with you. Okay, so welcome to our Broadband for All portal. This is the main landing page that you will see when you arrive. It talks about closing the digital divide and what Broadband for All is. It also features the various broadband initiatives, including the Broadband for All action plan, the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, and the Last Mile and Adoption programs, both of which you will hear more about later in this presentation. These two take you to some landing pages and then out to the respective websites that will give you more information about those initiatives. We have on the homepage also some quick links out to tools to empower communities, and that includes some of the planning resources, funding resources, and other things that we'll see as we kind of navigate through this today. We also have a section here for upcoming events. This links out to today's event is up there and additional upcoming events. And there's another page for that that will have anything that's related to broadband on there so that you can sign up, attend, be aware of upcoming events. And then if you want to subscribe, we'll be sending out monthly updates on Broadband for All, and you can use the subscribe function here on the homepage. So up here, we also link out to some of the trackers. We have a tracker for the executive order and the action plan, some of the items you just saw on the previous slides. And we also want to kind of dive into a little bit what we have out there for partners like you working on Broadband for All. So we have a page with planning resources, and this has a variety of resources on here and tools. This is our initial portal iteration, so we will be adding to it, and you're going to be a big part of that, we're hoping. So these planning resources that we currently have up are resources and toolkits for getting started. Understanding that some of your communities may be in different places from others, and just kind of helping folks to identify where they're at and then next steps that they can take. We have some sample strategic plans up here. We would love to add yours if you have one for your community or your county or your city. We would love to see those up here as well. We have some digital inclusion resources, checklists, and sample plans. And then we also link out to digital skills training tools. And again, we would really like your assistance to help us build this portal out. You're a big part of this. One of the other tools, and we've gotten questions about this before, is where can I find funding for broadband? So we have a funding database. This will be updated regularly as funding becomes available. And you're able to actually filter, and I'm just going to do a quick filter by libraries to see libraries education to see the type of things that are available under adoption. If you're a government, we can look under utilization, and it just changes and updates based on the features and filters. And then when you click on it, it actually will give you more information and link out then to the source of that funding. One of the things that we're most excited about here is affordable service programs. So for communities that are trying to assist with members finding affordable service, this is a great resource for that. We have partnered with Everyone On and the California Emerging Technology Fund, who you will hear more from later in this session, to provide this functionality on the website. And basically what you do is you're going to put in a zip code, and it's going to help find affordable offers in your specific area. So we're just going to click through a few of these here. Anything that would apply to your area. And as we do that, it brings up the offers that are available. We feature first and foremost the Affordable Connectivity Program, because that is a nationwide program. It has availability in all zip codes in the state. It is available to everyone who qualifies. And the Affordable Connectivity Program subsidy may actually offset and zero out some of the low cost offers that are then available in those areas. So then it would be a kind of a net zero to have internet connectivity for the home. We have those featured, and then we also have device offers. So you'll be able to do that search by your zip code. And we'll talk more about the Affordable Connectivity Program later on in this session. We also have an area over here where we can learn more about Broadband for All. One of the things that I just wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap on this is the partner organizations. So I think this is kind of a shout out because a lot of you will see yourselves on here. We have partner organizations that are working towards Broadband for All in California and closing that digital divide. So we've got our federal partners on here. We have our Broadband Council members. Partners with the state of California, broadband partner groups. We have the Broadband Consortia. We have MPOs listed, and we would like to continue adding to our local organizations and all of these other broadband partners as we proceed forward to working together to close the digital divide. We'll be asking you for you to contribute if you have resources, and we would also just love to hear from you if you have any websites to link out to that can be resources for other folks in the state as they work towards Broadband for All.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you to you and the staff for such hard work with our partners to put together the portal. Just wanted to reiterate that, like Laura said, we know that a lot of your organizations have local efforts and other efforts. The portal is not intended to supplant those, but to augment those and just aggregate resources for all of our partners across the board. And initially, you know, the intent is to aggregate and provide information, but also to track the various regional and local plans that are going on and how they can connect to both the middle and the last mile programs. So thanks a lot, Laura. Appreciate it. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our next segment. My partner, Mark Monroe, is going to talk about the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. Mark.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So yeah, I'm Mark Monroe, the Deputy Director for the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. We can go on to the next slide here. As I think most people are aware, SB 156 was signed last July, and it's you know, a really just a monumental piece of legislation in terms of creating several structures to really address some various aspects of the digital divide. The budget package, including SB 156, provided $6 billion of investment over the next 3 years to expand the broadband infrastructure, increase affordability, and really enhance access to broadband for all Californians, especially those that are unserved or underserved up till now. The SB 156 provides $3.25 billion to develop a statewide middle mile, an open access middle mile network to really, and this is kind of, I think, the unique aspect of the this approach is to kind of break out that middle mile and last mile in terms of funding efforts and development efforts. And so the 3.25 billion is really just to develop that network throughout the state. And it with the assumption that we can build along state highways, we can partner with Caltrans to in many instances to build along the state highways and really create that network that connects all of those communities that we're trying to provide that service to. In addition, it provides $2.75 billion for last mile infrastructure grant programs and other supporting programs to help fund those last mile services to link up with the middle mile. Next slide. So in terms of SB 156, it provides several different structures, including putting CDT in charge of overseeing the acquisition and management of the system. And we'll kind of talk through some business partner relationships that we have here in terms of really developing that overall system. I'm the single point of contact for the initiative, and that's kind of articulated in SB 156 that there be a single point of contact. It establishes a middle mile advisory committee that meets for the first year, meets on a monthly basis. The first meeting was held this last August, and it will be a monthly basis for the first year, and then it can move to a quarterly basis thereafter. And then SB 156 also requires that we retain a third-party administrator to really help with that industry lens and aspect of developing a system that doesn't just connect to the communities, but actually is operable as a service to provide reliable middle mile service. Next slide. So SB 156 identifies, as I mentioned, a number of roles and responsibilities, puts CDT really kind of in charge of the overall development of the program, as well as establishing the Middle Mile Advisory Committee. It is note the Public Utilities Commission identifies the unserved and underserved communities throughout the state. The whole proposal was initially developed by, in partnership with the Public Utilities Commission, and really trying to map out where those locations are and where along the state highway system we would need to build to connect them. SB 156 also provides for a third-party administrator. Golden State Net is the one that CDT has partnered with, and they'll be managing the development of the system. And like I said, really taking it from just a line that connects points to really an operating network that provides the reliability and it can be operated as a service. Caltrans plays a key role in that. The majority of this is envisioned to be built along the state highway system, and so Caltrans will be overseeing that actual the design and contracting for the construction. And of course, the Department of Finance will be they monitor the budget oversight, and also given that this program is funded with federal funds from the state and local fiscal recovery funds, or also ARPA, I think that's the other moniker given. And so really kind of taking in the information and making sure we're meeting the federal requirements. Next slide. All right, so in terms of leadership, we noted the Middle Mile Advisory Committee, and that's chaired by CDT, but has representatives from finance, Caltrans, the Public Utilities Commission, and government ops, as well as members from both the Senate and the Assembly. In terms of the business partner working groups on this, in addition to CDT, we have agreements signed with the Public Utilities Commission, the third-party administrator, Golden State Net, Caltrans, and Finance. And then again, in terms of the oversight of the funds, that's really on CDT and Department of Finance. So the guiding principles for the MMAC are to provide affordable open access middle mile broadband infrastructure to enable these last mile networks. And so to number two is to build the network expeditiously and use any existing infrastructure that might be available. And there's an expectation in this that we build as much as possible, but understanding that the funding is likely not sufficient to build the entire system. We want to be able to assess where existing infrastructure can be leased and used to build out the network. And then we want to prioritize the connectivity to unserved and underserved communities throughout the state. And that's where the Public Utilities Commission is very helpful in identifying where those communities are and how we focus providing service to them first. Next slide. In terms of the timeline, we've one of the first and most important components was the Public Utilities Commission going through their proceeding. This was held last August and September, and we trust most of the people on this call participated in that. That was really a central point in terms of pulling together information to really identify where the system needed to be, where we were trying to connect, where the unserved and underserved communities were. We have since then been in the process of working on the design and engineering with Golden State Net and Caltrans. And then as Eric Hunsinger from Golden State Net in a few minutes will be showing us, we're kind of moving to this phase of having a map where they would kind of guide where we move forward in terms of building it out. And so that's where we, kind of the stage we're kind of moving into now, where we've identified what we're building, we've identified where the need is, and trying to move into that phase of how we connect those locations. Next slide. And so this slide really just articulates kind of how the funds will go out. We have the $3.25 billion that was provided initially. And given that the majority of the costs for this will actually be for the design and construction of the system, we really see most of the funds being spent in the out years as we approach the 2026 federal deadline. Next slide. So as noted, in terms of the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, all $3.25 billion are federal funds that were provided through the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. These funds need to be under contract or encumbered by December of 2024, very tight time frame. And then the funds must be expended and liquidated by December of 2026, with the expectation that the middle mile system is fully functional by the end of 2026. So again, a lot of miles to develop in a very tight time frame. The $3.25 billion really was targeting, again, building as much as possible, with the understanding that we could use existing infrastructure to fill in the rest. I think initially we've estimated that of a system that was estimated initially to be about 8,000 miles long, the $3.25 billion might be enough to build 6,000 miles of it, which would mean that we would need to potentially lease up to 2,000 miles of the rest of the remainder to make sure we have a system that connects all of the unserved and underserved locations. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric Hunsinger to go ahead and present the statewide map.
Thanks, Mark. I cannot release my video. If you folks want to see who's speaking, somebody will have to help me with that. But in the meantime, the statewide middle mile network was initiated under the auspice of the folks at CDT, and Mark had highlighted some of the elements that I'll be going through. So I'll move quickly through my slides so that folks don't hear too much repetitive information. Next slide, please. So as the CDT had given us important directives and elements of the middle mile needs, we began the design process taking into consideration the numerous geological differences across the state. California is a big place. And so we wanted to understand precisely where the unserved, underserved folks within the state, constituents were. And so we began looking at numerous factors, numerous elements. In addition to that, we leveraged some of the research that the CPUC had done recommending their middle mile approach, and as well as engaged a diverse set of communities in conversations to understand specific local requirements. I'll add that in coordination with CDT, those conversations are still ongoing. As with any telecom network, the network continues to evolve. And what you'll see here are recommendations, not a final set of designs, but recommendations that continue to move according to needs defined by the citizens of California. Initially, we wanted to have the network reach within 50 miles of unserved population. That may seem like a long distance, but current telecommunications infrastructure standardly reaches that distance and much further. It just depends on how the design of the network is set up. Next slide, please. So some of the factors that we considered, of course, Deputy Director Monroe covered Caltrans right away. Pretty important piece there is coordinating with Caltrans, who has a formidable capabilities as far as procurement and also sizable real estate resources for the use of this system. It's got to go somewhere. In addition, we're optimizing relationships with entities that are looking to build. We'll be reviewing a couple of key ones within the state, local area organizations. And then there's commercial carriers that continue to expand their footprint across the state of California. So working with CDT and the CPUC, we also look to reduce costs of construction via previously funded CASF grants, whether middle mile or last mile. We want to leverage those opportunities to maximize the investment of the citizens of California. Next slide, please. So the next phase we're moving into is more of an optimization. So we have an understanding of the need, the potential routes that we will be targeting. And as Deputy Director Monroe noted, we need to understand those costs and how to meet those needs more precisely. And we do plan to do construction statewide wherever possible. There are a few opportunities where we might be able to reduce construction costs in the core, but that will still allow us to do construction pretty ubiquitously across the state. If we want to go to the next slide, I think we can start with some pictures. So here you're seeing how we've broken out the regions of the state. According to Caltrans districts, we've just consolidated some of those districts to make it easier to have analysis and conversations around the network. Next slide, please. So region 1 in the northern portion, I want to emphasize this is not in any particular order. We're just going north to south. Next slide, please. Here you see some analysis that the CPUC has provided, unserved residential and non-residential areas. The northeastern portion of California, severely in need. Many of the existing telecom routes in this area use this as a express route, and so distribution is not planned by some of the major carriers, which is why CASF awardees are really important to our plans here, because many of them are looking to leverage the state's middle mile plans for their last mile connectivity. Next slide, please. And here you see just the original proposal. As I mentioned earlier, network plans continue to evolve, and some of the joint partnership conversations that we've entered into have changed the design of this initial proposal. If we want to go to the next slide, we can see where that's evolved to. So we've expanded through conversations with CDT, partnerships with the CPUC. We've expanded the reach on this and leveraging Caltrans right away, look for opportunities to put in place the middle mile infrastructure to really strengthen the opportunities for last mile interconnection. Next slide, please. And here is just an overlay. It may be tough to see on your systems, hopefully not, but the initial CPUC middle mile recommendations. So we've expanded on that a little bit to create rings so that there is diversity and resiliency in all parts of this region. And this is a theme that you will see through the rest of the presentation. Just be aware it'll be somewhat redundant in that respect as far as the philosophy of constructing a network. Next slide, please. So some of the key highlights here, we're very cognizant of environmental hazards, fires. So we're throughout the state planning to underground this system of fiber optic cables with the goal of protecting the network from damage and also creating resiliency through the network so that it can be used effectively for the citizens. In this particular region, there's some key partnerships with two of the largest tribal entities in the area, the Hoopa Valley Tribe and the Yurok Tribe. So we're in conversations with those entities to potentially expand the network in some key ways, as well as a partnership with rural local exchange carriers to bolster their network and leverage middle mile designs. Next slide, please. So in Region 2, moving further south, you can see that this is a very diverse area, including agricultural zones and the Silicon Valley area. Interestingly enough, both areas are in desperate need of some sort of middle mile solution and broadband access. Next slide, please. And here, the CPUC analysis drawing out really concentrated areas of desperate connectivity requirements. Interestingly enough, one of the most connected areas in the country around the Bay Area is also one of the areas in most need. Next slide, please. And the original proposal was the leveraging potential open access networks as well as a combination of construction. Next slide. And here we have, as the design evolves, recommended construction routes that CDT will be analyzing as far as costs and capabilities. One of the elements of construction that's important to the citizens of California is that under Secretary Tong's direction and Deputy Director Monroe and Deputy Director Adams, ensuring that there is access to the network in the future. So the design goal here is that as the state owns its own infrastructure, the state will have access to the fiber routes. And so it's not limited to a particular building or limited to a particular address, but instead it'll be accessible by any entity in the future to interconnect with the fiber mid-span. Next slide, please. Here again is the overlay of the CPUC recommended routes. I want to be very clear that while there's some spurs associated with the CPUC recommendations, those are not forgotten. The plan is to evaluate those and then potentially enable those in a more resilient and robust fashion, potentially through last mile CASF grants as this network evolves. Next slide, please. So again, some of the continuous themes: very rugged mountainous regions, environmental hazards, fire risks, areas that would never get investment by a commercial entity. So the state has taken the initiative to analyze those areas and put infrastructure in place and not rely on commercial partnerships. There's a variety of areas in the region too of socioeconomic pressures, as well as affordability and availability issues. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here again, stretching east and west, a variety of geographies, Central Valley and the Sierras, as well as the coastal region and the Caltrans districts noted. Next slide, please. So again, even though there are metropolitan areas where you would think that carriers could help deliver broadband, there's strong need. And that's depicted here in some key cities. Next slide. And the original thought was a combination of potential open access routes that do exist today, but we're not waiting or relying on negotiations with any particular carrier. If you go to the next slide, the evaluation that CDT will be performing is on this proposed network, which would be constructed throughout the state. Again, the topology is a ring topology, resiliency, redundancy for very targeted pockets within this marketplace. And again, closing those gaps out with last mile CASF or any other entity that might come in and want to do connections to the network is feasible, because this is an open access network, a truly real open access network that CDT has planned. Next slide. Again, the CPUC recommendations. Many of these incremental routes are just routes that are easily within reach of the middle mile infrastructure. Next slide. So densely populated urban areas, again, mountainous areas, fire risk. I want to point out that here in this particular region 3, we also note a key potential tribal relationship with the Tule River Nation. So as those types of entities or any other local entities want to connect to the network, it will be available to them when they are ready. And so there are joint build opportunities in these areas that the CPUC has identified. Some of them are CASF awardees, some are not. And so we're looking to advance those relationships. Next slide, please. And here, this region may be smaller, but it's a very densely populated region. 2 districts there. Next slide. And again, unserved, underserved. It's a very disturbing picture, because there's numerous open access networks that are throughout the Los Angeles region and reaching into the Orange County, but the socioeconomic pressures just do not allow broadband access for many of those folks in this community. Next slide. So the original analysis or proposal was via the CPUC recommended construction routes and tying those potentially together with some existing open access network. Again, allowing entities to connect on the constructed routes wherever they needed to do so. And that continues to be the theme. Next slide. What we've done here is just interconnected additional routes. So the CPUC recommended routes were overlaid. We're recommending closing those out and interconnecting in a stronger way so that there's resilient rings, providing a bit more density to an area where we could potentially erase backhaul costs for communities. And so there's several planning organizations that are looking to take advantage of this network. So we just, we need to prioritize where the opportunity is and get the middle mile within reach of last mile initiatives. Next slide, please. And here again, the CPUC overlay. Next slide. So there'll be important analysis that we need to continue. We are talking with communities jointly with CDT about needs and desire. Some of them might be a little bit more difficult to accomplish. Some of them might need additional solution sets beyond just middle mile connectivity. Socioeconomic factors weigh heavily in this region. And so in addition to the middle mile, some creative solutions will need to be applied to ensure connectivity at the household level. Next slide. So 2 more regions. Again, a diverse set of requirements from dense urban areas and extremely rural areas. Next slide. And here you can see the Cpuc priorities, which we've taken into consideration with CDT. Sorry. So next slide. The original thought was that we could do some construction and tying, as you see north on the map here, with the northern region, but tying this together with the other statewide plans and regional plans. We thought that perhaps middle mile open access network could be facilitated and cooperations with corporations, but we're proposing that actually, next slide, we start with the construction basis. We could potentially achieve much more connectivity and perhaps in some key areas look at other possibilities. But for now, Caltrans right away provides a much more ubiquitous coverage for the region, as you can see here. Next slide. Again, the Caltrans recommendations. Next slide, please. So what wasn't truly visible was that there's many tribal entities that could potentially be benefit from the connectivity that was drawn out there for consideration. Densely populated areas getting access to infrastructure that is the state of California's, and any rural areas that are underserved could potentially tie into the network as well. Next slide. So this is just a holistic picture. This is not the final. I want to reiterate and hand this over to Mark Monroe, but as the network continues to evolve under the auspice of Deputy Director Monroe and Deputy Director Adams, we'll have revised and more tailored routes to the needs of the people. Thank you.
All right, great, Eric. Thank you very much. If we can move on to the next slide real quickly here, just to follow up on that. So really what CET had asked Golden State Net to do in putting this map together was to assume that in terms of this first draft, what would the network need to look like if we were going to build the entire thing? Ultimately, we don't think we would have enough money. I don't think there was ever an anticipation we had enough funding to necessarily build the whole thing, but we need to get better estimates in terms of the cost to be able to decide how much we build versus how much we need to lease. So you can go to the next slide here. So really, by moving forward with this, kind of our anticipation in terms of next steps is to look through this map, and there's CDT is doing some analysis right now, but our goal is to be able to get this map or a version of this map to Caltrans to start their project or their pre-construction work. So as noted before, Caltrans is expected to build the majority of this, and they have a robust pre-construction process that involves designing and designing the system. It involves all of the surveying and the permitting processes. And so we need to get Caltrans started on all of this. And then as we move forward here, we'll be looking for updated maps of existing infrastructure that might be accessed to be built into the system. And so really, as we get an updated estimate from Caltrans on how much it's going to cost, we'll be able to further identify how much we can afford to build, and then start going from the level of assuming we build everything to identifying where we can lease and start making some of those decisions about where the system, the unserved community needs can be met with leases as opposed to builds. But again, the assumption and the direction is to build as much of this as possible. So with that, I'll turn it over to AD.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, everyone, I want to introduce Eileen Odell, who's an advisor to Commissioner Darcy L. Houck at the Public Utilities Commission. She is going to speak about the last mile programs that the CPUC is implementing to support the last mile connectivity to the middle mile initiative, but also other broadband adoption and inclusion efforts throughout the state. Eileen?
Yeah, thank you so much. Can folks hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Good morning. As Scott said, my name is Eileen Odell. Thank you all for allowing me to provide an update on the CPUC's last mile broadband funding activities. I'm an advisor for Commissioner Darcy Houck. Commissioner Houck is the assigned commissioner overseeing our CASF, California Advanced Services Fund, sometimes called CASF, rulemaking, which is one of two of the rulemakings in which the programs I'll talk about today are developed and administered. And the other rulemaking is headed up by Commission President Reynolds, and that's our Broadband for All rulemaking. And we'll dive into that a little bit more in future slides. So there's a lot of information here, and if we run out of time, I'll be happy to follow up with folks later. As many folks have stressed, the broadband legislation passed last year, specifically SB 156, AB 14, and SB 4, demonstrated the state's serious commitment to closing the digital divide by leveraging federal recovery funds to construct a statewide open access middle mile network and to fund last mile broadband networks. The CPUC responded quickly to begin implementing this historic legislation by scoping the various funding programs assigned to the CPUC into two critical rulemakings I just mentioned. And so I'm going to give those numbers now. The rulemaking for the California Advanced Services Fund is R.20-08-021. And the rulemaking number for our Broadband for All proceeding is R.20-09-001. And so that information might be useful for you later. Next slide, please. This slide provides an overview of the various broadband initiatives in which the CPUC is involved pursuant to last year's legislative package. To begin, I'm going to summarize the group of last mile initiatives, and then I'll drill down into some of the more relevant programs in later slides. First, broadband technical assistance, sometimes referred to as local agency technical assistance, with $50 million to award. Second, the Loan Loss Reserve Fund, which will enable outside financing for local government and nonprofits to deploy broadband networks. This fund has $750 million to award over 3 years. Number three, the federal funding account, sometimes called the last mile account, which currently has $2 billion to distribute over 3 years. Fourth, the California Advanced Services Fund, which includes a number of sub-accounts or separate programs that address broadband needs in a variety of areas. Adoption, so helping people who have infrastructure actually get access to that infrastructure. Connectivity in public housing and other low-income communities. Funding for regional planning in our expert consortia, and a legacy infrastructure grant program with some statutory differences from the federal funding account. The box on the right summarizes the CPUC's contribution to the $3.25 billion middle mile initiative led by the Department of Technology, for which Mark and Eric just provided their update. Next slide, please. So the table on this slide categorizes various levels of public entity involvement in broadband networks in a number of ways that may be helpful for grounding the following discussion about last mile programs. This table is from a white paper published by the US nonprofit US Ignite that does a lot of smart city work, and there will be a link to that white paper available on this slide deck. The table goes from fully public models in row 1, labeled full municipal broadband, to fully private in row 5. The columns divide the type of work that can be assumed by either a public or private entity over the course of full network deployment and operation. The blue shaded cells are work the public entity does in each example, and the gray shaded cells denote private entity activities for each example. I wanted to highlight 2 points about this table. First, I want to note for that the bottom row, the full private provider, the public entity still manages rights of way and utility infrastructure. This is maybe stating the obvious, but the public entities have a role in this no matter how broadband infrastructure is deployed. Second, the rightmost column lists example cities that have deployed broadband, and row 4, Fullerton, is a California example where Sci-Fi Networks built a privately funded service-based competition network where one private entity owns the infrastructure and sells infrastructure access to 2 or more internet service providers who compete for customers. It's referred to in the chart as private developer open access. If folks are interested in more of this kind of conceptual level information about the various roles local agencies can play in broadband deployment, I highly recommend checking out the recording of our recent CASF workshop. In particular, our first panel was led by our Communications Division Director, Rob Osborne, and it featured a number of folks with experience in this space. It was truly one of the most energizing panels I've seen from the CPUC, so I do highly recommend it. So now I will go on to describing our specific last mile programs. But as we're going along, please keep in mind how one or more of our programs I'll describe can support your jurisdiction's work in any of the work areas listed in this chart, whether that's managing rights of way or directly providing broadband service. Next slide, please. The recent broadband package tasked the CPUC with awarding $50 million in technical assistance grants to public entities and nonprofits to help them prepare to provide service in their communities. A local agency is broadly defined in the program rules and may be a city, a county, including a county service area, a community services district, a public utility district, a municipal utility district, a JPA or joint powers authority, a local educational agency, a sovereign tribal government, or an electrical cooperative. So lots of room for folks to take advantage of this opportunity. Individual grants are to be no more than $1 million per applicant, and there's an expedited process for requests of $500,000 or less. And the funds can cover a very broad range of pre-project costs to deploy last mile broadband infrastructure, including environmental permitting, needs assessments, and strategic plans. On next steps for you to be aware of, the CPUC will hold webinars and post videos to present the project application process with eligible entities. These actions are targeted for late May, with application windows opening in June or July. So think about what work your jurisdiction may need to do to prepare for these other programs and how much of this can be supported by the technical assistance grant. The technical assistance grant guidelines are available on the CPUC website, and that will provide detailed information about eligibility. Next slide, please. Last year's broadband package committed $750 million over 3 years for loan loss reserve funds. The purpose of the fund is to assist local governments and nonprofit entities in securing financing so that they may build out their own last mile broadband infrastructure. The loan loss reserve will provide collateral to local governments to enable better borrowing rates and terms for bonds issued to deploy broadband infrastructure. Look for a CPUC straw proposal to be issued before August 2022, and also workshops to collaborate on the practicalities and details of implementation. There will be an opportunity to provide comment on that straw proposal. So if you plan to apply for a loan loss reserve fund, or we highly encourage you, please engage with the CPUC, consider becoming a party to the proceedings so that you can share your expertise to help inform the rules and implementation of this program. Next slide, please. Another last mile program and part of the broadband infrastructure service puzzle is the federal funding account. The CPUC adopted program rules for the federal funding account earlier this month at the April 21 voting meeting. CPUC targets accepting applications by July 2022, so look for data on interested applicants on priority or presumed eligible areas in the coming weeks. The data will be published on the Commission website as well as distributed to the service list or distribution lists for the two proceedings I've been referring to throughout this presentation. As this last bullet notes, it's a good time to begin planning for these applications. Public entities can evaluate activities for a technical assistance grant to then support federal funding account broadband work. Finally, you can also evaluate how you can support applicants to serve communities in your jurisdiction, even if you do not plan to apply. Next slide, please. For over a decade, the California Advanced Services Fund Broadband Grant Program has supported a range of broadband investments. The program was updated and reinvigorated by a number of pieces of legislation last year. Also, a proposed decision is up for the CPUC to consider in May that would modernize program rules for a number of longstanding CASF programs or sub-accounts, including the adoption account, the public housing account, and the Consortia account, which again funds regional broadband experts. Actions you might consider include joining the distribution list or service list for CASF activities, which is how grant timing and applications are typically announced. Potentially consider engaging with the Commission to inform implementation of these programs, such as by becoming a party to the CPUC rulemaking. Opening comments on the proposed decision I just mentioned are due next week, with reply comments shortly after. I know that's a very quick timetable if you're just learning about this, but I do want to put that option out there as available. Next slide, please. Ooh, I have gone through quite quickly. Oh, apologies, one more slide. So this last slide is on another particular program that we think cities and counties might be interested in. This revamped broadband public housing account grants will provide grants to connect qualifying low-income housing, such as publicly supported housing communities, with infrastructure, and will also require that these residents receive internet service free of cost. We're targeting accepting applications in June or July 2022. And so an action item for attendees here would be to assess broadband needs of publicly supported housing communities and prepare applications or support entities that will apply. I will also note that we're expecting an additional staff proposal on rules for expanded eligibility for this account. And so if you're interested in helping create those rules, that is another item that you should join the CASF service list to be aware of and potentially become a party in order to provide comments on that staff proposal. Next slide, please. So this concludes my remarks. Please let me know if I or my colleagues can follow up with you. A great single point of contact is the email statewidebroadband@cpuc.ca.gov. That's statewide broadband, all one word, at cpuc.ca.gov. So thank you again so much for allowing me to provide this update, and I will hand it back to Scott.
Thank you, Eileen. Really great presentation. Wanted to introduce the leads on our next segment on the Affordable Connectivity Program update. I want to welcome Sunny McPeak, President and CEO of the California Emerging Technology Fund, and Susan E. Walters, the Senior Vice President at the California Emerging Technology Fund. Take it away.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks to you and the California Department of Technology, the California Broadband Council for convening this roundtable, the first of a series to both inform the public and get feedback. This particular panel is on the Affordable Connectivity Program. You'll get an update from a panel of experts. What we want to share with you is that the California Broadband Council in March adopted goals for the state to achieve in getting all eligible low-income households online. Those goals are 90% by 2024 and 95% by 2027. So 95% by 2027. We have found in our work throughout the state that in getting people to sign up for an affordable offer, in this case now the Federal Affordable Connectivity Program, ACP, it is important to have at least three elements. The first is awareness, and that comes from being able to have credible sources providing information. Those credible sources include all of those of you on this webinar today, and particularly public agencies, counties, cities, school districts, regional broadband consortia, the MPOs. It also requires public advertising, and we're going to talk about how that can be done in partnership with the internet service providers. And lastly, there needs to be outreach and a support from what we call trusted messengers, community-based organizations that can do outreach in language and in culture to help those households that need assistance in both signing up and then selecting an internet service provider. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce my colleague, Senior Vice President of the California Emerging Technology Fund, Susan Walters, who has led our work for 15 years. She has a network of CBOs and digital navigators throughout California. And the panel today will reflect a deep experience on all aspects of those three primary components of success to get everyone signed up. Susan Walters.
Good morning, everyone. Can we go on to the next slides? Thank you. So welcome. We're thrilled to see so many people here for the important work that we have before us. And so we're going to cover in this very short time period a high level on the points Sunny was just mentioning. So the California Broadband Council, Sunny mentioned, in terms of setting our goals for the Affordable Connectivity Program. And then we want to talk a bit about how important it is to track the work that we're doing throughout the state. And then we, of course, have a call to action for you. So let's move on. So just briefly to level set, make sure everybody understands, the Affordable Connectivity Program is $30 a month. It is $75 if somebody's living on tribal lands. There was an emergency broadband benefit, which we refer to as EBB, that was $50. That ended in December, and Congress has provided for the ACP program at $30 per month. And it can apply to existing service if you qualify, or new service if you qualify. Folks who qualify are recipients of Lifeline service, Medi-Cal, CalFresh, a specific part of the National School Lunch Program, people receiving veterans benefits, the WIC program, women, infant, children, and tribal TANF, and recipients of Pell Grants. The application process is applicable to everybody except those on Lifeline. And the good news is If somebody is on Lifeline, all they need to do is call the internet service provider they would like to get their home service from and let them know they're a Lifeline recipient. It is an automatic qualification, which is tremendous. Imagine a federal benefit you don't have to apply for. Let's go on. So the 5 million households, these are the numbers that we know are eligible. They're even higher, actually. But we have set 5 million as the goal. And we really want to invite all of you to think about how you can help achieve that goal. That's our major call for action today, is how do you participate with your constituency, with the areas you're responsible for. So you'll see the enrollment as of April, we were at 12% of the nation's, of the goal for California. So you'll see listed here all the different ways that we are looking to involve stakeholders across the state of California, starting with these broadband plan review panels, the roundtables we're participating in today. We're really grateful that CDT also is taking on this effort to promote ACP enrollment. Then you'll see their qualifying agencies. So social services, health departments, they have a big role to play. Community-based organizations. So any of our elected officials all have a major role to play. Let's go on. So some of the things that we noticed about EBB is that only 30% of the people signing up for EBB, right, which is ACP's predecessor, were using the benefit for home internet. We need to help people understand the value of home internet, and that with Lifeline, people can use that benefit for a mobile phone, and they can use ACP for home internet. Can you imagine existing today and not being able to have one or the other, either home or mobile internet? So what you see as the graph, it's just a quick picture of the data that we have been working with USC, with CSU Chico on, and now CDT, to set up so that you will be able to see the progress your county is making, or the progress by zip code that you're making in signing up eligible households. So this is a tremendous help as we go through the process of reaching 5 million. Let's go on. So we're going to hear from several speakers today that do provide a continuum of experiences as they seek to increase their ACP enrollments. We think there will be something that catches your eye here and is applicable to what you might be able to do in your area. I'm going to go ahead and introduce Crystal Ayala, who will be our first speaker. She is from San Diego County and the consortium that they have built to talk about the efforts they are just beginning to pursue with increasing ACP enrollment.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to everyone for being here. My name is Crystal Ayala. I'm a senior partnership strategy at the San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG. For those of you who are unfamiliar with who SANDAG is, we are the regional planning agency for the San Diego region. I think you can go to the next slide, please. One of our primary responsibilities is to develop a regional plan, and that means that we are working on many initiatives that advance quality of life and equity in the region, including transportation and mobility, climate and sustainability. But we all know, right, that access to high quality and reliable internet really intersects with a lot of these initiatives. And so because of this, we've taken a leadership role in the region to really advance digital equity. Last December, our board of directors adopted a regional digital equity strategy and action plan, which really serves as a roadmap for improving broadband access and adoption in the region. And since the adoption of this plan, we've been really busy implementing many near-term actions to continue building consensus that broadband is an essential public service, improving permitting, expanding infrastructure. And then today I'm happy to be sharing an update on a really exciting effort to expand broadband adoption and increase awareness of various digital equity resources available in the county. So we are going to be launching a Get Connected campaign, and the intent of this campaign is to really help improve and increase enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program. Susan shared some of the data that's available through the partnership with CSU Chico, and they estimate that about 380,000 households in the region, that's about 1 in 10 households in the county, are eligible for the Affordable Connectivity Program. But today, just about 20% of households are actually enrolled. So we're really looking at this campaign to help us move the needle and help see enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program steadily rise. Now, as you can see on this slide here, in addition to increasing enrollment in the Affordable Connectivity Program, we also want to use this campaign to really expand our messaging and raise awareness of several other amazing digital equity resources in the county, such as where you can access free Wi-Fi and how you might be able to check out a laptop at no or low cost to you. And on this next slide, we'll see a little bit about our creative approach to really expand outreach in the county. I think next slide, please. So 211 San Diego is actually a member of our Digital Divide Task Force. This is a group of stakeholders that we convened last year to really help us develop our regional digital equity strategy. And we're really excited to be working with 211 San Diego, which really serves as the county's resource and information hub and connects many community members and people with a variety of community, health, and disaster services and resources. So we're really excited to be able to work with 211 San Diego to leverage the really robust and real-time resource database to host all of these digital equity resources. You can see an example of what their online database looks like. And it'll also provide community members with access to a free 24/7 call line where they can find assistance on how to get connected. This unique partnership really enables us to think beyond, traditional marketing and outreach efforts that rely largely on social media and digital marketing, and really help us expand the reach of the outreach campaign and ensure that we are reaching the community members that we intend to through this campaign and ensure those have access to internet accessibility. Next slide, please. The Get Connected campaign is very broad and comprehensive. We're going to be launching this campaign in just a few weeks in early May. The strategy will include both a direct outreach component, which will include a variety of tactics such as print material distribution, direct outreach in many community events around the county, direct mail, as well as the use of paid advertising like placements in hyperlocal print publications or small scale out-of-home advertising. As Sunny and Susan both mentioned, the campaign efforts really need to rely on community partnerships. And so we're really excited to be working with a network of community-based organizations and our Digital Divide Task Force as trusted messengers to really help spread the word and really raise awareness of the variety of resources that are available in the county. So we're also going to be publishing a community partner toolkit, which will include things like sample social media posts, speaking points, print and ready materials such as posters, flyers, and banners and postcards that our organizations can readily make available throughout the community. Next slide, please. And if you'd like to get in touch with us on how you can partner on the Get Connected campaign, or if you'd like to learn more, read our regional digital equity strategy and action plan, you can find all of this information on our website. My contact information is also available on the slide. So I think now we're going from San Diego up to the Bay Area, and I think we have our presenter from Oakland speaking on some exciting initiatives that the city of Oakland has underway.
Thanks so much, Crystal, and thank you for facilitating this marketplace of ideas. It's so exciting to be on this call. My name is Patrick Messick, and I'm the program director for Oakland Undivided, an equity-based collective impact initiative to close the digital divide here in Oakland and bring digital access to our 36,000 unconnected neighbors. The digital divide has long been a compounding structural injustice in Oakland, concentrated primarily in 3 areas: West Oakland, Fruitvale, and East Oakland. As a city with one of the highest concentration of CBOs in the country, we're fortunate to have had several organizations like Tech Exchange and the Oakland NAACP who have been fostering digital equity for decades. When the pandemic hit in 2020, the broader community coalesced around a foundational understanding. Digital access is a 21st century civil right. We can go to the first slide, please. Thank you. Leveraging this collective that you see on the screen, we've distributed over 35,000 computers and 15,000 hotspots to households in need. We've coordinated robust advocacy at a local, state, and national level. We've institutionalized comprehensive systems for data collection and information dissemination and digital skills training through our trusted institutions like our schools, housing authority, libraries, and our CBOs. We've launched a public Wi-Fi network, free apartment Wi-Fi, and housing and low-income residents, and a community-owned LTE network. With national attention shifting away from the crisis of the digital divide, the coalition you see on this slide is foundational to the sustainability of our work ahead, especially our efforts to increase awareness and adoption of the Affordable Connectivity Program. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In my limited time today, I want to highlight a few central components of our ACP awareness and adoption efforts here in Oakland. The first is around data collection. Better data helps us make better decisions, and we are not going to rely on ISP self-reported data. We know that the best data is going to come from our community members themselves. The first component of this data collection is the Tech Check survey. The Tech Check survey is a home digital access survey that we've administered to our 50,000 public school students and families. And we've integrated this basic digital access survey into schools' back to school process, ensuring that year over year, we're collecting a massive amount of data around which of our families need access to a computer, internet, digital support, or both. We also recognize, however, that schools and families are only one subset of our population in need of digital access support. So through a program called the Town Link and our partnership with the Greenlighting Institute, we have worked with 10 CBOs whose icons are kind of here in the bottom left-hand corner to disseminate a more in-depth survey and collect detailed information about the barriers families face in fully accessing digital connectivity. From that data collection, we've come to a really important understanding and something we've heard again and again, and I'm guessing that you'll probably hear it as well as you go out and talk to your community. When you say, hey, are you interested in signing up for the Affordable Connectivity Program? Do you want internet at home? One of the number one things we hear is, why would I need home internet if I don't have a computer? So I think some of the most exciting work here in Oakland has been around how we get computers to our families. At the risk of oversubscribing this seminal program, I think everyone in this call, when you're done, you need to pick up the phone, you need to call your public libraries, and you need to call your school district, and you need to ask them, are you applying for the Emergency Connectivity Program? This program, the window opens on the 28th, actually today, and it closes May 13th. This is a bulk purchase, a $1 billion federal program that allows schools and libraries to bulk purchase both computers up to $400 per unmet need and internet hotspots or sponsored service. And this has been so foundational to our work here in Oakland. Using the Tech Check survey that we've integrated into our back to school form, anytime a student identifies as having a need, we're able to provide them with a $400 computer. So at the risk, again, of oversubscribing this program, I really want these federal dollars to flow into our great state. And there's $1 billion just ready for the taking. So please, please, please make that call. Happy to share any resources if you reach out about how we promote the the Emergency Connectivity Program to make the lift a lot less scary on these institutions like libraries and schools that are already doing so much. The second component is around our refurbished devices. We are really fortunate to have an organization, Tech Exchange, that's been refurbishing computers for over 30 years. So find those trusted CBOs within your community that have already been doing this work and empower them with the resources to continue to scale up to distribute those devices to families in need. Last slide, please. So as we think about our affordable connectivity program efforts, we kind of have broken it into 3 phases: awareness, trust, and enrollment. So for awareness here in Oakland, we're working through our citywide communication channels, trusted anchor institutions, namely our schools, libraries, and housing authority, and CBOs to socialize the benefit. We have found that so few people are aware that the affordable connectivity program exists. And when they hear about it, they're very excited. So working with our citywide communication channels, everything from Head Start to our elderly care and every social service in between, first, just socializing this benefit to teach them about what it is. And we're in the process of providing the collateral that will help them share this information with the folks they work so closely alongside. With our CBOs, we're working with our national partner, Education Superhighway and Greenlining, to stipend and train CBOs to lead outreach for the folks that they work alongside. And that word stipend has been key, as we found that many of our CBOs and trusted institutions are at their capacity. So leveraging some of those technical assistance dollars to ensure that we're increasing capacity on the ground to lead these outreach efforts. And finally, I want to talk about the work that we've done through schools. They are amongst our most trusted institutions, and schools through the ACP are uniquely situated to support enrollment. As a former teacher, I can tell you that when I call a parent, they are much more likely to pick up than a random phone call. So working through the folks that our families trust most is critical. And through the eligibility protocol, all CEP schools, community eligibility provision schools, are eligible. That's schools above a certain threshold and free and reduced lunch. We are giving all of our students at our 72 CEP schools an enrollment letter in CEP and a digital student ID that will allow families to apply with those eligibility documentation in hand. I'm super excited to participate today in this conversation and to learn from all the brilliant folks on this call. Do not forget to contact your trusted institutions about the ECF. And I believe next we are handing it off to our friends over in Fresno. Thanks, Yale.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick. This is Eduardo Gonzalez. I'm the director of the San Joaquin Valley Regional Broadband Consortia. And I do want to state, and go back a little bit of what Susan and Sunny mentioned, that trusted messenger. Not only do we have to be that trusted messenger within the community, and that these are public agencies, school districts, nonprofits, everybody who's working in the community to try to get people connected has to be that trusted messenger. And not only be that trusted messenger, but provide the services that are culturally and linguistically appropriate. Sometimes we forget that just by providing services in English is sufficient enough in our community. It's not. We understand who our community members are and who we have to target to be able to provide the services and assistance that are needed. So our regional broadband consortia has 4 goals. One of them is, you heard today, is middle mile and last mile connectivity within the region that we serve. And we serve 8 counties in the region, from Kern County all the way to San Joaquin County. Middle mile and last mile infrastructure is very important. Part that a little bit with mapping. So we understand that some of the CPUC mapping is based on census tracts, and some of it is to the household. So we partner with community-based organizations, our Fresno Digital Inclusion Committee here in Fresno, that is doing some of the mapping within Fresno to make sure that we understand who and who doesn't have internet at home. The second part is, once that internet service is in the community, how do we get those adoptions, right? So right now, the program, the ICP program, is perfect because it allows us to introduce internet and the importance of being online to community members, not only in rural communities, but urban centers, specifically low-income neighborhoods, right? The third component that we have under the Regional Broadband Consortia is digital literacy. And I'm glad to partner with the state, and I love this, the Broadband for All portal, and allows us to be able to put our parent university program on the map, because we have been able to provide digital literacy skills training to parents in different languages: Spanish, English, Hmong, Punjabi, Mixteco, and Triqui, throughout the state of California, not only in the region, but throughout the state, because they're virtual classes. The fourth component is, and I think Patrick mentioned great, is that not only do they community members need access, but they really need the devices to be able to connect. And so our Fresno State, our Fresno State Refresh program allows us to be able to get computers to low-income families that are in need for them to be able to connect and be part of the Internet of Things, right? And so let's go back a little bit and talk about adoption. So our Fresno State Connect, which is our second goal in our regional broadband consortia, operates a 20, at times there's 26 staff member call center that allows us to connect in Spanish and English, Hmong and Punjabi families into low-cost internet options. We don't work for any ISPs, so we want to make sure that based on their address, we offer and provide the information that's necessary. Now, one of the key things that maybe public agencies, school districts, and nonprofits can do is become that trusted messenger, provide the information, provide the number to register for the program. What our call center does is go a little bit above and beyond that. We handhold people to the process so that they're able to log in, upload information that is required to be able to participate in the program or qualify for the program. But that trusted messenger, us as a university, allows us to go into people's homes, in phone, allows people to open their doors to us to come in and provide that information because we are that trusted messenger. So everybody on this call, 250 or 300 people that are in this call, you are that trusted messenger. You know who to work with to be able to get to those households to meet the demand of internet service. Now, there's a goal. Susan talked about the goal for California. We need your help to be able to meet that goal. Our 26 staff members can only do so much in the region. We need help of everybody to be really partnered together throughout the state to make this happen. I always think California is a big family, and we are a family, and we need to help each other out. And I think there's an opportunity for us to be able to share best practices on how this is being successful and within specific regions. With that, I think I'm going to keep it a little short, and I'll have, I believe, Mr. Hollins, Selwyn Hollins from Los Angeles County up next. Thank you.
Thank you, Eduardo. Just wanted to take a few minutes to share an experience that we had in Los Angeles County, where we were able to boost enrollments with a very low cost and very targeted campaign. So according to the United States Census data, it is estimated that there are more than 365,000 households that lack internet service in Los Angeles County. There are also more than 1 million households with annual incomes less than $50,000 a year, and a great number of these households are among those that lack internet subscriptions. So seeing the urgency of this problem, in November of last year, the LA County Board of Supervisors approved a motion titled Investments to Accelerate Digital Equity. And it was largely based on leveraging existing resources to get the job done. The motion consisted of several directives, including instructions to fund and administer a county-wide promotional campaign to educate and encourage constituents to participate in financial subsidy programs that will assist in the cost of computers and internet service, specifically the emergency broadband benefit. At the time, more than 800,000 households in Los Angeles County were eligible for EBB, but FCC data indicated that less than 45% of the eligible households were enrolled in the program. So the county identified $3 million to fund the campaign, and the Internal Services Department was assigned to lead the campaign through our Delete the Divide initiative. Again, the board motion was approved in November, and during the 2.5 weeks that followed, including the Thanksgiving holidays, ISD partnered with the California Emerging Technology Fund, and we developed a campaign for the EBB. This partnership was important because CETF had already been doing a statewide campaigns, and so it helped us to ensure the consistency of the promotional communications by utilizing some of their marketing models. Now, our promotional campaign was a targeted multimedia, multi-language effort with support from the Board of Supervisors, several county departments, and numerous community-based organizations, school districts, medical agencies, faith-based organizations, and local businesses. it's important to note that using people or groups that already connect with the target population was really key here. One of the
Excuse me,
yes.
Director Hollins, I wanted to make sure that the slides are being advanced for you as you're tracking your presentation.
I didn't have any slides today, but you can show them. You feel free to show them. I'll cover it as best as I can. But I wanted to point out two of the biggest groups that were helpful, and they are trusted in the community, was the Los Angeles County Office of Education, which represents 80 school districts in the county, and then healthcare agencies were truly impactful because they interact with the target population pretty much on a daily basis. It should be noted that the promotion of the EBB was limited in duration to only 3 weeks because of the December 30th enrollment deadline. Now, when we had the 3-week campaign for the EBB, our costs were a little more than $200,000. It included television and radio media buys, as well as ethnic and hyper-local media in multiple languages. We hosted a news media event to answer questions regarding the EBB, as well as the county's Delete the Divide initiative. Participants included reporters from various television, radio, and newspaper outlets, again, including hyperlocal and ethnic media. Additionally, we had op-ed articles authored by a board of supervisors, and press releases were published in various targeted community media outlets. Ads were placed in various social media platforms. More than 450,000 flyers and brochures were distributed in multiple languages. More than 113,000 text messages were sent, 16,000 pre-recorded telephone messages, 17,000 emails, and call centers supported by CETF received over 5,000 calls. The combination of the different multimedia strategies resulted in more than 22 million media impressions in that 3-week period, which is basically the number of times someone saw the marketing content. The 3-week promotion also saw a significant increase in visits to the Internet for All Now website. These efforts in total increased, just in 3 weeks, increased enrollments by 43% during the month of December compared to prior months. A couple of weeks ago, we launched the second phase of our countywide promotional campaign, which is focused on the Affordable Connectivity Program. We're utilizing some of the same strategies that were successful in December. Plus, we're expanding outreach efforts to over a 6-month period, and we plan to launch a Digital Navigators program. If we're trying to connect constituents who don't have internet access, we have to get out there and interact with them on a personal level. So the Digital Navigators will provide constituents with in-service assistance and understanding and applying for subsidies, finding affordable devices, and technical support for accessing the internet. They will interact with constituents at the residences, community events, and also provide call center support. So hopefully this provided some helpful insight, and thank you for your time. Back over to Susan.
Great. Excellent presentations. Thank you so much, everyone. It was a quick run through, but it really shows that with a concerted effort and thoughtful planning, there are effective strategies that can be used to increase the ACP enrollment in your communities. The devices are a big issue, along with digital literacy, and those are strategies that deserve some more thoughtful solutions to them for different communities. Tomorrow, the California Association, CSAC, the California State Association of, County Supervisors is hosting a more detailed workshop from 9 to 11 to talk about how counties and local governments can put together these efforts. Many of the speakers you heard this morning will be available then to go into more detail. You will be able to see the collateral, understand why different choices were made for different strategies, and better understand metrics and tracking mechanisms, as well as cost, because believe it or not, most of this can be quite affordable. So we look forward to talking with you in more detail. Feel free to reach out to any of the presenters, and we'll put in the Q&A the link for tomorrow's session as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunny, Susan from CETF, and our local and regional partners from Oakland, San Diego, Fresno, and Los Angeles. I think hopefully, what we've been able to show is the connectivity between, the different elements underneath the Broadband for All program, through the action plan to the middle mile and last mile programs, and then the real big focus on adoption and leveraging the affordable connectivity as a tool. As Laura Sasaki had said earlier, we really are eager to promote the affordable connectivity program here in California, when because it has that ability, when coupled with other, low-cost offers that are out there that are also trackable on the Broadband for All portal. It could really lead to a significant reduction in costs for families and other residents that have to make budgetary decisions when it comes to having home internet service. We really appreciate our local and regional partners for sharing their best and smart practices on adoption. This is something we look forward to really partnering, aligning, and supporting to the extent we can at the state level, and are really eager to work with CETF and others to both create a page on the Broadband for All portal to track California's, enrollment numbers in the overall program, and also by jurisdiction and zip code. So thank you very, very much. Next, we want to pivot just lastly on a digital equity update. Next slide. Have you seen that the state really has some essential building blocks in terms of, its overall digital equity plan, with the action plan and the middle and last mile initiatives outlined and funded by SB 156. And as the Secretary Tong mentioned at the top of this program, that we're at this moment in time where federal and state, policies, priorities, and funding are aligned. And so I think all of us are looking forward to the recent bipartisan infrastructure legislation and the programs that will be coming out of that, a total of $65 billion to help states and localities continue to close the digital divide and invest in broadband. We wanted to give you a heads up because I think we in the CPUC and CETF and other partners have heard from you and have been in conversations about this, that two key programs, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program to support broadband infrastructure and deployment, and then the State Digital Equity Planning and Capacity Grants. Those notices of funding opportunities are really teed up to be released in mid-May, is the latest intelligence that we have heard. And so in the spirit of this roundtable and all of the collaborative work that our entities have done thus far to align and lock arms on closing the digital divide, we did want to just give a heads up to all of you that both the BEAD program and the State Digital Equity Planning Program require development of state plans that the state entities who are leading these programs will need to engage really extensively with your jurisdictions and beyond to covered populations to develop those plans. So want to tee up that we'll be all eager to continue evolving the approach to addressing the digital divide here in California. And I think with that, I know that there have been a lot of questions in the chat. Some of them has been answered, but we wanted to open up the remaining portion of this event to have a facilitated question and answer. Laura Sasaki from our staff and Alex Bond from Broadband Equity Partnership are going to read through the questions in the Q&A. So I'll hand it over to you two.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, all. This is Laura Sasaki. During the Q&A, we will be going through the questions that were put in the Q&A portion during the webinar. We have that sorted out by section. So we'll go through the Broadband for All and Digital Equity, Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, and then last mile questions, as well as anything on ACP. Once we get through those questions, we will then turn it over, if we have time, to the attendees. And at that point in time, we will take raised hands. We will not be doing that yet, as we'll just start working through the questions. So with that, Alex, if you can tee up the questions on the Broadband for All for Scott.
Great, thanks, Laura. So yeah, Scott, first question on Broadband for All and Digital Equity comes from Sean Takeda McLaughlin. So this question is, where in the state or federal proceedings should local community-based digital equity advocates who are working across sectors for public health or safety, education, economic development, culture and arts, and civic engagement focus time and effort now?
Well, thank you for that question. I think first and foremost, I would just want to direct that there's always opportunity to engage at the quarterly Broadband Council meetings, and to the extent that it's related to those efforts at the Middle Mile Advisory Committee meetings, and those happen quarterly for the Broadband Council and monthly up until, I believe, July on the Middle Mile Advisory Committee, and then it goes beyond that. As you can see, there's a number of partners in the state working on this, on these various efforts. Sean, and as we had, kind of teed up on the upcoming digital equity planning, both potentially through BEAD and through the development of the digital equity plan. I think folks who want to engage on those should definitely, reach out directly, to us, and we can connect you with the appropriate folks. But then as the digital equity planning goes on, there'll be a really extensive opportunity to engage along each of the different separate areas that you mentioned.
Great. Next question comes from Bob Jacobson. His question is, what higher level applications will the action plan champion? For example, interregional integration or innovation platforms?
Got it. Appreciate that question. And thank you. We're, the action plan was developed in late 2020, in the middle of the pandemic, and we spent the first year really wrapping our heads around making progress on those initial items. Mr. Jacobson, on an annual basis, the Broadband Council will, and our staff will review and revise the action plan, as necessary. So we're eager to hear, your suggestions about areas that we can go in. And I would also just point out that with the NTIJ programs and the upcoming plans that the state's going to develop, there will be, I think, opportunities to collectively, through a broadening partnership and of stakeholders and partners, to explore, gaps that need to be addressed.
Got it. So those are the Broadband for All and digital equity questions. I'll now pass it to Laura to ask questions on the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative project.
Okay, great. These questions are going to be for Mark and Eric. And before I go on, I do want to answer some general questions that have consistently come through. We will be providing the recording. We will be providing copies of slides and transcripts, and those will be up on the Broadband for All portal under the events section. And that has been posted in Q&A. So moving on to middle mile, we have a couple questions from Ed around how communities can request middle mile points of presence to be able to connect and build out last mile. And then how might a government jurisdiction connect with Golden State Net to request additional middle mile deployment areas? So Scott or Mark, I think I'll tee that off to you and Eric.
Sure. First of all, I mean, I think that it's important to note that the initial anchor build really was kind of put together with a lot of public input already. And I believe, you know, within the Public Utilities Commission's proceeding, I believe they're still taking input. So certainly providing some input there for updates to the map would be helpful. Also, submitting any comments via the MMAC about any, again, state highways that the map doesn't currently address, I think, or doesn't currently identify a need on. I think that would be helpful. But in terms of the approach and kind of the way SB 156 worked is that, you know, we've had the Public Utilities Commission, they've come out with you know, they kind of went through their process to really provide the initial map or the initial map of need and kind of work out a map with Caltrans, and then kind of go through that, you know, discuss that publicly to get input. And similarly, you know, as we hold the monthly MMAC meetings, we've been taking input there in terms of where, you know, what areas need to be served and kind of what freeway routes best to connect those. So those are those are kind of the key things. We'll continue to meet monthly and, you know, take in additional input in terms of routes. So that would be my initial answer to that. Eric, do you have anything to add?
Sure. As I said in the beginning portion of my piece to the presentation, the infrastructure that the state is building is designed for flexibility. So while it is specific to approximately every 2,500 feet, we can't know precisely today until the system gets built. One of the things that we're putting in place is the ability to connect mid-span between buildings. So we would do a ring cut on the fiber and hand off of 2 pairs of fiber to provide redundancy. And so any entity that would come and connect to the network according to the rules that and guidelines that CDT sets would need to coordinate that interconnect. We would probably install, I mean, physically a meet me vault, which would allow unfettered access by the last mile entity that would interconnect with the broader system. So I think that's probably an extremely aggressive approach. It's not unlike many commercial carriers use in a metropolitan urban setting, but we'll be applying that same sort of infrastructure statewide.
Thank you both. We have a question asking where can I find a primer on basic definitions, simple descriptions of each component of the network solution, et cetera. This basic background is essential for local government conversations with governing bodies and the public.
Yeah, so I would put, so first of all, in terms of kind of that sort of document, I think that is still being kind of worked out. We have some drafts we're reviewing internally. But as we look at really that broader system level design document, we post these on our Middle Mile Broadband Initiative website under resources. And so I think that would be the place that we would expect to be posting that in the weeks to come.
Thank you. We have a question saying, as we begin to study the data mapping results, we've noticed discrepancies in the analysis. What is the plan for ongoing data collection to ensure the maps are accurate, which will bring funding to the high need areas? And that says, such as cross-referencing other data collected, socioeconomic map, census collected, et cetera.
Yeah, so as noted, I think certainly as we move forward with Middle Mile Advisory Committee, I think that's one venue where we can continue to add information. And you can certainly reach out to the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative program here within CDT. And we can take a look at that. I think the Public Utilities Commission will continue to take new information, and I think the way SB 156 envisions this project really there will be kind of an evolution as more information comes in. But it's really important that I think that we that people provide that feedback to the Public Utilities Commission, so that we can make sure that we understand where anywhere where we're missing data with regards to unserved and underserved communities.
Great, thank you. Question on, let's see, if a city has already spent its allocated ARPA funds, what can the city do to help this project?
So in terms of the really participating in terms of the and kind of supporting as we move forward with the broader Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, I think identifying how this is going to help communities, I think is going to be useful because obviously the intent of the system really is to provide that a network along state highways where everybody can connect to, and that we can really have a net that kind of picks up all of the unserved and underserved communities throughout the state. So certainly participating in MMAC meetings and providing any feedback there is helpful. And then as we build out, as Eric noted, we have we're designing a system where locals can tie in to the system, so I'm going to say up to every 2,500 feet. So I think there will be plenty of opportunities for that.
Hey, Mark, I just wanted to add to that concurrently that other ways that cities, can partner is to really engage with the PUC and take advantage of the programs they're offering and developing your local broadband plans and establishing partnerships either with your, current incumbents or new things. And so, or new entities and really, concurrently is Mark and the team and Golden State Net are building out the middle mile, making sure that the last mile solutions that are necessary for your community are being planned and ready to connect when the middle mile network is up and running.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I think this question is going to be for Scott and Mark. So we do have a question from Sean again on whether or not we can share some, can we share some perspective on the role of Utopia in supporting rural counties and middle mile under the new agreement?
Yeah, I mean, so certainly we're trying to design the system to be able to take on anyone who or any providers that can access it. It's supposed to be open access, and so regardless of who's providing the service, it's our intent to develop a network that ties with everyone.
Yeah, and I would just add that it's it's an interesting development, and I know Mark and the team have already had a conversation with RCRC, the group that's helped set up that JPA, and to better understand how the state's middle mile open access network can support and enable any last mile solutions that they develop.
We did have a couple questions around timing and scheduling for the middle miles program itself and the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. Mark, could you just share a little bit as far as what things are looking at timing, and if we're running alongside the plan that we have in place?
Absolutely. So as I think we noted, this is heavily driven by the time frames that were specified by the U.S. Treasury with regards to the ARPA funding. And so we have to have all of the funds under contract by the end of December 2024. That means any construction contracts as well as any lease agreements. So it's a very aggressive time frame. And then by December of 2026, we need to have the system completed and built out, and the intention by January 1st to be functional. So that's really the time frame that we're working back from. So if you take a look at Caltrans, understanding that Caltrans has a pre-construction process that they follow. Caltrans is a great partner because they own the land, and they regularly do projects like this. They do. They obviously their projects are overwhelmingly transportation projects, but they do have some experience doing middle mile projects along the state highway. And so this is not an entirely new area to them. Historically, given that a lot of the fiber projects really would be components of or part of transportation projects, it's taken them, as part of the broader project to 2 to 4 years to do the pre-construction work of going out, making sure, confirming land ownership, going through the permitting process, doing the survey, doing the designs. Those would be part of transportation projects. Caltrans is working with the CDT and other partners on permitting and other processes to really make this go faster, because all of that work has to be done before we go to contract, which has to be done by the end of 2024. So in terms of kind of backing up from that time frame and acknowledging that process, that's one of the reasons we at CDT are working with Golden State Net and Public Utilities Commission to really come out with if we had answer the question, if we build the entire system, where would it need to be built? Because we need to start the process and the associated time frame within Caltrans working on that. And then subsequently, so in the weeks to come here, we want to get Caltrans starting on that process for wherever it would need to build. And that's going to inform us, obviously, provide more information about how much it's going to cost per mile, and therefore how much we can afford to build. At the same time, we'll be doing more assessments in the months to come here of where could existing infrastructure be leased to really fill in the gaps. Obviously, the cost estimate is going to determine really the size of the gap in terms of what we can and cannot afford to build. And then we need to identify that existing infrastructure in the months to come here regarding where we have an alternative. And similarly, there's other looks we're giving this in terms of trying to understand, to the extent if we have to choose between certain locations for where to lease versus where to build, what is the market for service, right? So most of us are familiar with dark service versus lit service, and kind of the sorts of entities that would be interested in both. And in some cases, we might have areas where they're not the right size entities that are interested in dark service, so or dark fiber, or leasing of dark fiber. So if the state builds where there's going to be some capacity for leasing dark fiber to providers, we want to make sure we do that in the right place. So in the next 3 to 6 months, we're trying to come back with that more of a layer on the top in terms of understanding where we need to build and where we can lease. But by starting now with Caltrans process, we make sure that Caltrans has the time to do what it needs to do on any of the build locations throughout the state. And then as we refine that information, we can come back and refine the amount that we're having Caltrans work on.
Great. Thank you for such a thorough response on that, Mark. I hope that answered a lot of questions that people have. So our wrap-up question for MMBI is from Stephen Meyer. Is there going to be any traffic prioritization on the middle mile?
Well, the system is intended to be open access, and so to address the needs of the communities. So I don't know, Eric, do you want to speak to where we are in terms of the system level design thus far?
Sure. So as far as traffic prioritization, Golden State and with CDT really is not going to limit traffic for any particular user. The initial system will be dark fiber, and that will be available on first come, first served basis. The incremental cable counts that CDT has prioritized should cover any demand set. We have spoken with mobile carriers, commercial carriers, and local entities, so it'll be available to anyone that can make use of that. In addition to that, CDT is evaluating putting in a dense wave multiplexing system, DWDM, for lit services, which could include 10 gig, 100 gig capabilities, and perhaps more, depending upon the need of the end user. But no particular entity is going to be prioritized over another. So there will be sufficient capacity in the system, and it will be expandable and flexible according to demand specific to local areas. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Mark and Eric. Okay, we are going to pivot over to Eileen Odell at the CPUC. And Alex, if you can get the question started for CPUC and last mile.
Great, thanks, Laura. So Eileen, lots of interest in the CPUC's programs. So let's start with some technical assistance grant questions. The first one is from Luis. And his question is, can these technical assistance grants also go to nonprofits working to connect people to broadband?
So our eligibility rules are in the decision that we passed in February, and we have so many different programs that I always want to make sure I'm actually looking at the correct ones before I answer a specific eligibility question. And so I'm going to pull that up for you right now. And so I think we had on the slide a list of entities that qualify as a local agency. And so you do need to qualify as a local agency to get local agency tech assistance. And so those qualifying entities are cities, counties, community service districts, public utility districts, municipal utility districts, JPAs, local ed agencies, sovereign tribal governments, and electrical cooperatives.
Got it, thanks. So next question is from Kelsey. And she's wondering, who can the city of San Diego follow up with directly to get information on local technical assistance? We have specific questions and would be much appreciated. Is there a point of contact?
Yes, so that would be that email address that I included on the very last slide of my presentation, which is statewide broadband, all one word, at, I don't have my slides up anymore. I believe it's statewide broadband at cpuc.ca.gov.
Okay. And a reminder to all attendees, we will be sharing the slides after the event. Okay, so we got a couple of questions about definitions of served and unserved. So the first one is from Jessica, and her question is, what internet speed do you consider being served? We're finding that we in the Morongo Basin are a rural area that is underserved, but the internet providers state that they are serving this area by providing the minimum 6 Mbps, which is way too low. Is 6 Mbps still the definition of being served? And if so, will that be increased to a reasonable speed anytime in the near future?
Mm-hmm. So just general disclaimer, those types of rules can change program by program. But because today I think most of the interest is centered around the federal funding account, that's the largest kind of pot of money that we've been talking about today. For the purposes of that program, the definition of unserved is lacking a reliable wireline connection to 25/3 service. But so that's a quick answer to a complicated question. So I do recommend just checking out the program guidelines for which particular program you're interested in. That information will be available there.
Okay, and next question is from Bobby. How are you defining unserved? Is it at the household level or a census tract level?
You know what, that's a bit technical for me to answer, and I want to make sure that I do that question justice. So if you would mind emailing us that question so I can follow up with you.
Okay, so we had a couple of questions about the last mile program. First one's from Lee. And he's saying, last mile program question. In the adopted ruling, there is last mile allocations per county. Are those maximum allocations? Will those funds be given directly to counties, or will there be a grant application process?
Sure, so they're not direct allocations to counties. There will be an application process. And with regards to whether those are maximum amounts, I think it's too early to say. There are still plenty of opportunities for additional funding to be put into the federal funding account. So right now it may be appropriate to think of them as a maximum, but that's not for certain.
Okay, next is a question from Ian. Will the federal funding account and other last mile broadband connection grant programs into areas that currently lack middle mile be accepted if those applications are relying on connection to the state middle mile network? I am asking in the context of the Yuba foothill region of our county that is currently quite far from any existing middle mile, and we are hoping to connect using FFA and other funding sources.
Simple answer is yes, and we would like to encourage connection with the statewide middle mile project.
Got it. We have a question from Mark. CPUC's broadband infrastructure deployment proceeding rulemaking initially seemed to limit last mile projects to wireline/fiber, excluding wireless technologies, even if able to meet the speed and latency requirements. Has this evolved to allow fixed wireless access solutions, which could be easier to deploy, and in many cases more scalable?
No, the federal funding rules still do put a focus on wireline deployment, but just reminding folks that that is only one program that we do fund. And so there's a little bit more leeway under some of our other infrastructure programs like the CASF infrastructure account. But yes, succinct answer, federal funding account rules still do primarily focus on wireline deployment.
Great. So we have another question from Sean. He's wondering about the future of federal and state lifeline, E-rate, high cost and rural telehealth programs. How will these programs ensure sustainable, resilient, and affordable service for all?
Oh, that's a very broad question. I'm not really sure I'm prepared to go into each of those individual programs and how they will achieve those goals here today. But if Sean does have any specific questions about any of those programs, I do encourage him to email us.
Great. So we have a question from Ed. In rural areas where incumbent local exchange carriers aren't deploying aerial fiber, what can be done to enable and simplify pole access for third parties or community co-ops to install fiber along existing wire lines without having to create a competitive local exchange carrier?
That's a good question. And so I think the first thing that I would say is I would advise you to get looped into the CPUC's pole attachment proceeding, where we're looking at some of the issues around streamlining that access and looking at numerous ways to really speed up pole attachment. And so that rulemaking number is R17-06028. And so that's kind of the most actionable item that I can give you at this point. But I do understand that historically entities have filed as competitive providers or partnered with CLECs that handle pole attachments. And a number of entities has successfully made agreements with right-of-way owners about access without a CLEC registration. And this includes the Sci-Fi networks. And so those were not agreements for pole access. We're just saying that the possibilities are out there. But again, like I said, the most actionable item would be to look at the CPUC's rulemaking on that.
Got it. Thanks so much, Eileen. Those are all our questions for the CPUC programs for now, and I'll pass it back to Laura.
Thank you. We did have a question, and I'm actually going to take this one, which was regarding schools, whether or not there has been any traction in getting E-rate available for off-campus connectivity. And the answer to that is there's always a lot of requests. There are a lot of petitions before the FCC to have those rules modified. As of right now, there is not anything in progress. Anytime that there's a modification that's significant to the E-rate program, there will be a notice of proposed rulemaking released. And again, that's on the federal level. So that is something that is likely to have pretty widespread publicity around it, but as of right now, there isn't anything to provide for the off-campus connectivity. through the E-rate program. So we do have some additional questions here to get to, and Alex has asked, not our Alex, this is an Alex from the question and answer. Are there digital literacy effort examples from across the state focused on people with disabilities? For example, deaf, hard of hearing, visual impairments, physical, developmental, et cetera. For example, focused on utilizing accessibility features on computers and smartphones and accessing assisted technologies. Scott, I think that one's for you. Oh, and you're muted.
Scott.
Can you unmute? There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Susan, I was wondering if you and CETF would want to take a stab and talk about some of the work that you all are doing in this area.
Sure, happy to. So we work with the California Foundation of Independent Living Centers and have worked with the World Institute on Disability. But right now, the most active group is CFLIC, and they have a technology access program where they are also helping other nonprofits who are providing digital literacy learn how to do it in an accessible way. So if there is a specific need around that, meaning in a particular area, let us know and we'll connect you with who has accessible training. But if you are wondering more the general of, who's doing that in general and trying to make sure others have that accessibility, it's the California Foundation of Independent Living Centers. So I hope that answers, but let us know.
Yeah, and Susan, I would just want to add and make a plug is the state continues to move forward on both BEAD and digital equity planning. That what we would love to hear from you all is what areas does the state plan not address? What areas do you think need to be addressed, particularly in the area of accessibility? And then also, who else should we be talking to and including in these conversations? So there will be a post-event questionnaire to solicit some of those answers from you. So thank you.
Thank you. It's an important question. Appreciate it coming forward.
Okay, we have a question from Philip. I'm a representative of a local nonprofit agency, Rotary, trying to connect information, planning, implementation of service and local funding. As such, we would like to communicate or connect directly. How best should we proceed? And I think that is a local funding. I'm going to pivot that one to Scott. I think that's for us. There's not a specific who that's directed to for connection, but I think it's for CDT.
Yeah, well, to answer that question, the Office of Broadband and Digital Literacy, either myself or Laura or Cole would be happy to be a point of reference for anyone looking to get connected with any of the additional state partners. We also encourage you to, use the Broadband for All portal as a reference point to, what we're attempting to do is map out all the work that's being done and to categorize that into, information on where support can be found for, whether it's infrastructure or deployment or digital literacy. So definitely, we're happy for people to contact us and serve, is a conduit to other entities. Great,
thank you. We have another question that came through for CPUC. So Eileen, this one's going to be for you. To clarify, is the 150 million available across all programs and will be shared, or will each funding account receive 150 million?
Good question. That 150 million would be allocated across all of the CASF accounts each year.
Great. And to follow on that, a CASF question, please clarify when the first round of CASF infrastructure grants are due. It was mentioned by July, but when does the window open?
So clarification, the July dates do not apply to the infrastructure account. We do not currently have application windows scheduled for the infrastructure account. Our staff is going to be working on a staff proposal to modernize some of those rules. That'll happen later this year, and we're going to get that out of the way before we open another application window for the infrastructure account.
Okay, great. And can municipalities contract with nonprofits to help advise them on broadband projects?
Yes, certainly. The technical assistance program will allow for that under a number of different scenarios. Do check, because there are certain rules on what types of work is eligible for reimbursement, but that seems that it would likely fit within the eligible reimbursement for local agency tech assistance.
Great, thank you. And Scott, I'm going to direct this one to you. Is there a requirement for a regional plan in any of the legislation? And I'm gonna frame this one around probably digital equity.
I don't believe there's a requirement for a regional plan, and again, would need more context for that, but know that a number of the entities and folks who have signed up today have already been working on regional and local plans, and actually have pretty far development. They're pretty far developed in the process. I would definitely say we encourage any local entity or regional collaborative that doesn't have a plan to begin making a plan. We would be, again, happy to support with resources and assets through the Broadband for All portal, or, through some individual assistance and to help identify any of the programs that were discussed today with our partner organizations to, get additional support in developing those.
Great, thank you. And also, this is an opportunity, as Scott was saying, if you have plans that you have developed and are ready to share, we would like to feature those on the portal so that other communities, counties, cities that are in different places in the process can learn from the experiences and plans that you have. So I want to thank everyone for your questions. That does conclude our question and answer period for this or session for this presentation, and we're going to move on to our next steps.
Okay, for next steps, just wanted to reinforce some of the messages and the questions that there have been. This is the first of many roundtables to come over the next year and the coming years. As far as post-roundtable follow-ups, we did reference there'll be a post-event questionnaire that we'll send out to the attendees, really wanting to get a sense of how we can improve on these, what worked, and some very specific requests of you on information and best and smart practices you can share that we can feature on the Broadband for All portal. I do want to, again, remind folks of the message that kind of prayer from GO-Biz about the permitting survey, really looking to enhance permitting at all levels of government is going to be critical on the infrastructure deployment side, both in the middle and the last mile. So please be on the lookout for a local jurisdiction permitting survey. Really just want to get a sense of where your jurisdictions are at, what kind of resources you have, any constraints or barriers, and then ways that we might be able to support that. The next thing is just to reiterate the event recording, the slide presentations, and the transcripts will all be posted on the Broadband for All portal events page. A link is going to be on this presentation. And then do you want to remind you of the other sort of milestone convenings we have on these projects? The next Middle Mile Advisory Committee meeting is May 20th, and the next California Broadband Council meeting is May 25th. And I think that's it for us. I just, we hope this was a meaningful gathering for you all. We thank you for your time and your ongoing efforts to bridge the digital divide. We are eager to continue aligning and building our partnership with you so that we can achieve the aims of Broadband for All and truly foster digital equity and inclusion throughout the state. So thank you very much. I want to also do just a thank you to all of the staff and the partners who have worked so hard to put this event together and handle the logistics. In front of our partners, just wanted to say you did an excellent job. So thank you all.